ICQ Podcast, episode 379, Friedrichshafen Preview. Well, hello and welcome, fellow HAM Radio enthusiasts, to this, our 379th episode of the ICQ HAM Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin MLB is joined by Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November uniform, Caryn Eve, Kilo Delta 2, Golf uniform at Tango, Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, and Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, to discuss the latest Ham Radio news. Myself, Colin, M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, takes a look at this year's HAM Radio Friedrichshafen event and previews the show. As always, your ICQ podcast is an advert-free show and has been now for coming up to 14 years, and we do that basically by your very kind support. So with this episode, we'd like to thank our monthly and subscription donors who continue to donate and see value in the show and help us, say, pay our way and our bills, etc., and invest into projects like the digital group. So we'd really like to appreciate their very fine support. You can help out in a very, very easy way. All you do is think of the value you find in the show, turn that into a monetary figure, and go to www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where you say there's a lot of options there of how you can send that monetary value our way. Well, let's get on with your show. And this episode, we're going to be joining Martin, Dan, Caryn, Eve, Edmund, and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including Morse kit building event and hams with radios arrested for spying. As always, hope you enjoy.
Whether it's across the pond or over the channel, the ICQ podcast is international.
Herzlich willkommen in Deutschland.
Good evening.
73 de España.
By amateurs, for amateurs.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 379 of the ICQ podcast, and tonight's roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I've got Dan Romanchik, Mr. Dan Romanchik, back from Hamvention, and you weren't with us last time, Dan, so good to have you.
I know, and I'm really sorry I had to miss last episode, but I'm certainly glad to be back now.
That's great. That's great to have you. We also have, and maybe I should have done this person first, but we also have Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT as a guest presenter tonight. Evening, Caryn.
Good evening, and really glad to be back here. I think this is either my second or third time. Very pleased to be a part of tonight's discussion.
That's great, Caryn. Lovely to have you with us, as always. And as I say, I know it's a big commitment for you in the States because it's in the middle of your working day, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I actually had a great excuse to take the day off, so I'm relaxing with you all.
That's great. That's great. Moving to the UK, Mr. Edmund Spice is with me. Hi, Edmund, M0MMG.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody. And I'm speaking to you from my back garden because the room where I normally sit for recording the ICQ podcast isn't available this evening. So if you can hear bird song or dogs barking or noises in the background, that's the reason.
Right, no problems at all, mate. Well, I think our US cousins would call that the backyard, but we know what you mean, mate. No problems at all. And last but not least, we move over to Germany, where we have Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Evening all.
Yeah, Dixon and Doc Green impersonation tonight, eh? It's a good one.
Dig it out of the cupboard from somewhere.
Yeah, not a problem. Okay, let's start with our first news story. Young person's Morse Tutor building kit building event is going to happen, and that's over in Northern Ireland. But I think this is something great because if you give a youngster something to build and they take it away with them, that's something they're going to remember for a long time. I'm going to pass it to Dan because you're our resident Morse code person, Dan. What do you think?
Well, I'm always for anything that's Morse code related. But I agree with you. This looks like a simple kit, so certainly within the abilities of most kids. And like you say, if they take it home with them, then they'll, get them hooked early. That's good.
Yeah. Well, I remember building a 40-meter receiver from the GQRP club with Colin. We built one each one weekend here. He came over from Ireland, and we built a couple of things, an amplifier and a audio amplifier, that is, and this little receiver. And I must admit, I remember Colin going back to Ireland extremely, extremely happy and all excited. The problem was he showed it to his good lady who went, "Oh, what's that?" But no, you have to enjoy building these things. Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I see this and I say to myself, I wish they had this when I was the age of some of these youngsters. I might have had better building skills, of which I have none right now. So I think this accomplishes two things. It gives good basic building skills for these kids to grow on, and that's such a big part of the hobby. And it also, lights a little spark for Morse code. And honestly, what kid doesn't want to know how to communicate in a code that no one else can understand? There are a million things you can pass between you and your friends that no one else will get. And there's a real appeal to that. It's a fabulous and really fun hook for kids, a really good activity. I hope it's well attended.
Yeah, me too, because I think, as you say, great fun for kids. And they do enjoy Morse code, in fairness. When we used to go to HMS Belfast, I'd probably do with the guys, a whole team of us would probably do anything up to 200 Morse certificates in a day when we were invited there. And it's good fun. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, Caryn stole my couple of points I was going to come up with, and I'll add a third one to it. I was going to say there's two factors here. There's actually three. The one is building skills. The other one is learning something about Morse code. But the third one is also networking between the children. If there's multiple children there, it's also good to get the kids that are interested in technical things together, and they'll go off and do their own stuff on their own, away from all these old fogey adults, and more power to them. So I think this actually hits 3 points in one go, and good luck to the people organising this. It looks like a nice kit, not too complicated, and good on them.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Ed, we may be in senior years, but I believe we're all young at heart. You, me, Dan, Frank, and the rest of the boys. We're all young at heart. We all enjoy our toys, don't we? So that's a good thing. Edmund, you've been learning a fair amount of Morse recently. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I wish I were younger. Incidentally, the news story refers to youngsters or young people without specifying exactly what age constitutes a young person for the purposes of this. So if you are in Northern Ireland, and specifically in County Armagh, and specifically near Tandreggy or Tangery, apologies if I've mispronounced that, you might want to contact the organisers and check exactly where the cut-off is. If, say, for example, you're a few weeks after your 16th birthday rather than a few weeks beforehand. But other than that, it should be 3 hours of good fun. Starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. And if you are a young person, you can book a free lunch. So that can't be bad. And if you click on the link to the Eventbrite page, there is a photograph of the kit on there. It does look quite simple. Runs off 2 AAA batteries. And it looks like there are 2 3.5 millimeter jack sockets on it, one for the key and one for a pair of headphones. So looks a nice little kit to build, not too difficult there. And I've completely forgotten what I was going to say next. So back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. No problems at all.
Oh yes, I've just remembered. I was going to say I agree with what Caryn said. When I've been at Jamboree on the air events, the youngsters who have shown an interest in Morse code have tended to say things like, well, I can hear it, but it doesn't mean anything to me, but I know there's a message in there somewhere, and I want to know what the message is because I'm nosy. So even though the message isn't encrypted, if you can't read Morse code, it might just as well be. And that wanting to know, that inquisitiveness, I think is part of the mystique that Morse code holds, even with young people, Martin.
I think you're right, mate. I think you're right. And let's say I do see a lot of people. I must be one of the few people that has great difficulty with Morse, but there you go.
An update to this, if you go to the booking page, they've actually got a second session. So they've got it starting at 10 a.m. and same thing on June 25th at 2 p.m. So they've obviously got so many people booked for the first one that they've started a second session. That's good news.
That is very good news. That's very good news. So, guys, if you're in Northern Ireland, live nearby, young enough to go, pop along.
Yeah, it doesn't age limit even on the order page, unfortunately. So people interested will have to contact the organisers.
Well, even if you're not young enough, but you live close by and you're a radio amateur and you're good at Morse, I'm sure the event organisers would possibly be quite pleased to have other people there, maybe just to help a little bit on the build. So, great event. And it's a shame all of us are not a lot younger and living in Northern Ireland, because I think the whole group here would have gone. Right, moving to our next news story. This happened at Hamvention, but AMSAT announced a new youth incentive. And I look at this and think, AMSAT youth space is going to be quite good. Dan, I'm going to go to you first again on this one, because I know your company's partially involved in this as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so Amateur Radio Digital Communications, the private foundation I work for, provided at least part of the funding for this program. I'm not sure about all of it. And I actually did get a little presentation from Frank Karnauskas about the program, and it looks like a great program to me. One of the kind of unique things they're doing is they're not only trying to enlist the aid of amateur radio clubs, but also using local news sources like TV stations and radio stations to promote this program. And that'll be an interesting twist to see how well that works out. But yeah, I think this is a great program.
Yeah, I think you're right. And any publicity to amateur radio is usually good. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, as always, AMSAT things are well organised. But in this particular one, I also haven't got a great deal of interest or time to go through the details here. So let's leave it to the satellite and the US experts.
Right. Well, I'm not a satellite expert, but there's lots of things they said are going to be doing with CubeSats and SDR radio and LEO sats and things like that. So I would quite think this is going to be quite a bit of fun. Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
Okay, this one seems to go in a lot of directions. I myself have not toyed with any satellites, probably never will, except as far as, I guess, satellite radio listening in the car, which doesn't count. But what I like about this program is it opens the kids' minds to what satellites can do and what satellites are already doing. They're watching us, they're watching the Earth, they're watching climate change, and that's certainly a big issue right now. They're allowing hams to communicate. They're participating in research. I think if this accomplishes nothing else, and it just makes young people aware of the great depth that satellites permeate our lives, it's a good thing. And it also means one person's interest in satellites doesn't have to be the next person's interest. There's enough satellite activity to go around. As far as the online SDRs, I think they are fantastic. I use them myself a lot to test propagation before I fire up the rig. So getting kids accustomed to using that is another nice way of just getting them tuned into satellite activity up there. I think this is really worthy. This is going to probably grow even bigger than it already is.
Yeah, well, I think AMSAT normally do a very, very good program when they decide to do something. So that sounds really, really good for me. I'm quite pleased with that. You know, there's another one of these things. Shame I ain't younger and living in the States, isn't it? I'm losing out every which way here. But no. Amateur radio is a big hobby and we all enjoy it, whatever we do. Moving to our next news story, the mainstreaming of Morse code. Now, there's a number of adverts going on in the US, Caryn was telling me. So, Caryn, do you want to go first on this one?
Absolutely. Well, who among us doesn't love a nice car? Those of us who are ham radio operators really love when a car can combine with the hobby, or at least embody the spirit of part of the hobby. Now, the car maker Jeep has been toying with the idea of Morse code for quite some time. It's had a number of ad campaigns over the years, I think dating back to maybe 2015. They've had some Morse code related campaigns, and in one of their vehicles, I believe it is the Wrangler, the left footrest actually has raised dits and dahs, which spell out the various types of terrain that the car is used to traveling on and is capable of traveling on. But in April, a new campaign was launched, and this is really neat because this makes Morse code accessible to everybody, ham or non-ham, Jeep owner or not. You go to the website and you can actually generate a Morse code message on the screen. And this ties in with Jeep's campaign. They call it Jeep Life is Calling. And the whole theme behind this and where Morse code fits in is that those of us who've either done the expedition or chased the expeditioners know that CW is a great mode for the expeditioners, and especially going off to a far-flung part of the earth. Jeep understands that spirit, and what they're trying to say in their campaign is, you know, if you're going off somewhere remote, this is the car to take. I mean, I don't know how you would get a Jeep to Beauvais. You'd have to bring it on the boat, I guess. But it's certainly an imaginative and very effective campaign. And I love that it sends the very not so subtle message, hey, Morse code isn't dead yet. So I love this story.
Yeah. Well, Morse code isn't dead. And as much as that I can't do it, and I've said this many times, I do see the need for it. I do see the fun that people have with it. My only concern is that I'm usually burning the candle at both ends and in the middle. And the minute I sit down and listen to Morse, I fall asleep, Dan. I'm sorry. I can't help it. So anyway, round to Dan.
Oh, that's okay. Well, you know, so it's even more poetic than this. On the page jeeplifeiscalling.com, it reads, "The simple mechanics of Morse code is the universe's way of talking to us." Well, how about that? And, you know, hams have noticed there was an item on the amateur radio subreddit of a fellow who just bought a Jeep, and he took a little picture of a footrest that I guess is in the driver's side. And in Morse code, it's got the words, sand, snow, rivers, and rocks. So that's, I guess, where you can take your Jeep on all those different types of surfaces. So, yeah, I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I think it's a good marketing ploy as well. But if it gets Morse code and amateur radio brought into good light. Why not? Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
I was rather interested in the comment a bit further down in the Reddit post where somebody came back and said, that's all the places that you'll never find a Jeep. They're only ever driven on the road to take kids to school and this kind of thing. Anyway, that's true of a lot of four-wheel drives. JPL is all I can say. Jeep are talking about going around, the deserts of the US and whatever, but it was only a couple of years ago that JPL, the Curiosity, the Mars Explorer, in their wheels and tires, they also printed or are printing Morse code into the Martian soil. So the idea of vehicles and Morse code together seems to be something that's been around for a while, and interesting, especially for vehicles that are meant to go off-road. Yeah. So on the link in the story in the website, there's a little game there. You can actually type in Morse code as dots and dashes, and it'll convert that to the letters for you, so you can see if your code knowledge is up to scratch. And why not? It's all good publicity for Morse code, which I believe has just gone through an anniversary a couple of weeks back of the actual writing and release of Morse code itself by Samuel Morse. So this all comes around the same time together.
Yeah, certainly does. And what you were talking about, off-road four-wheel drive vehicles being used in cities, going back probably 20 years ago in the centre of London, or just to the west of the centre of London, this place called Chelsea. And there were so many four-wheel drives, ladies and gentlemen, taking their children to school in the morning in these four-wheel drives. They got the nickname of Chelsea Tractors. So, oh dear. So I can see where you're coming from, Ed. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Any publicity is good publicity. If I was being a real grumpy old man, I'd say something along the lines of, it's a shame that on the website you can only experience Morse code by typing it in dots and dashes, whereas on the amateur bands you don't encounter it like that, you hear it. But because I'm not an old grumpy miserable person, I won't say that, and I'll say any publicity is good publicity. How about that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you called me a grumpy miserable old devil, because I certainly have been in the last few days. I feel better today, but...
No, that's me.
Hey?
That's me. I'm the grumpy one.
Is it? Oh, right. Oh, you're not in my league, son. Trust me. Anyway, I've never known you be upset or grumpy about anything. But no, that's good. Good story.
You didn't hear what I was saying to my laptop shortly before we started recording, when it was in the middle of installing Windows Update, though. I was grumpy then.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty normal, you see. What they do is Microsoft have written this piece of code in the upgrade system that if presenter is about to record ICQ podcast, please do a mega update and reboot 3 times. That's a fairly bit of code, you know. I'm going to get into trouble for that one day. No problem. Anyway, just joking. Okay. Caryn, you brought the next news story to us as well, and there's a new insight from a Retooled disaster drill, and effectively the guys had problems and got round them and had their conference, but I'm not going to spoil it. Caryn, would you like to go first?
Sure. I take you now to the Pacific Northwest of the United States, where the annual, I believe it is mostly annual, drill Cascadia Rising. They envision a scenario of an earthquake along the Pacific coast of Washington State, Oregon, Northern California, and British Columbia, and the tsunami that follows. And when they usually do this drill, and this is a very, very large, involved 3-day drill, they do it, of course, with boots on the ground. And that plan was preempted by disaster itself. There were wildfires, there were horrible rainstorms, and of course the ongoing pandemic. And they still wanted to have the drill, so they got clever and did what most folks do. They took it to virtual environment, took it to Microsoft Teams, and they had it as a discussion-based drill, which, in and of itself, that's not news. I think the whole world has been in one big discussion online for the last couple of years. That itself doesn't make it news, but what makes it news is this. This drill adapted in the face of multiple disasters to hold its own disaster drill, and in the process, because they took a different approach, because they followed a different format, they came up with new insights. And I spoke on the phone last night with one of the organizers, one of the planners, and he said it was a pretty big team that retooled this drill, one of whom is an amateur radio operator. And so they were also looking at the roles that the hams play in this drill and would play in the event of the disaster. And they're finding that they can actually make better use and bigger use of the hams in the future. More work for hams, how about that? So instead of just being in charge of keeping the roadways clear and making sure there's access to the airports to get resources in and out, and instead of delivering to impacted communities and helping with communication and traffic control and getting supplies into the shelters, they're now sorting through other ways that they can deploy the hams to make good use of their radios. And they will be doing an assessment the day after the drill ends. So that will be, I believe, the assessment will begin on the 17th, June 17th, Friday. It was really a nice surprise for me to know that something like this didn't have to be canceled. And by being a little creative and being able to adapt in the face of some multiple challenges, they found a whole new way of looking at things. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, you got to think outside the box. Only I'm looking around because Mrs. B isn't here. She's caught me twice on this, Caryn, the last couple of days. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to think out of the box." And then she came in the room 2 minutes later with a box in her hand and said, "There you are, you're out of the box."
Watch out. She may bring you an oversized box. You're going to have quite a challenge.
It was worse than that, you see. I was struggling with a problem the other day. And I said, "It'll be all right when I get the light bulb moment and it comes on and everything becomes clear." And 2 minutes later, she walked in the room with a light bulb and stuck it in my hand. Oh, terrible.
Long as it wasn't an LED, because then you got to worry about interference.
Oh, yeah. They don't all interfere, you know.
That's good.
Well, unless it's the fact that I spend most of my life up on VHF and UHF. Anyway, I don't see the noise problem, but yeah. Right, Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, just echoing a lot of what both of you have just said, actually. But maybe what they should be doing is running not only the annual disaster drill, but also a virtual drill 6 months in between. Because, as you say, once you start to look at something from a different angle, you may well find better ways to do it. And, you could implement the suggested changes from the virtual conference into the next physical drill and see if you've actually improved things. So the two together, I think, would be actually a very valuable way for them to go forwards.
Yeah, agree with you, Ed, on that one. That's not a problem. And the other thing is I suppose there's no failure in an exercise, because if something goes wrong in an exercise, that's a win and a learn and a great thing. If it all goes totally swimmingly and nothing goes wrong, that would be when I would start to worry personally. But We learn from what goes.
Yeah, learn from the mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll ask Dan, because Dan, this is your side of the world as well. What's your thoughts on them doing a virtual test?
Well, so we do that a lot here. I don't know if you guys do that in the UK, but here in Michigan, we have what we call the simulated emergency test every fall, and I think that's probably true all around the country. And because the country's so big and everybody has different possible emergency scenarios, you have to have separate exercises. Like for example, since I live in the middle of the country, we're definitely not going to have a tsunami here. The Great Lakes are big, but they don't do tsunamis. So anyway, it's always good to keep on your toes, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose of it. And it does provide an extra little publicity kind of thing to let those emergency management departments know what ham radio is capable of. So, all in all, a good thing.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it's no good just saying, we couldn't do it this year because of COVID or whatever. If you've got to keep on your toes and practice and think about these things and how you can do it better. So I think this was a really good thing. Spot on the money on that one. Moving to our next news story, which is our last one, actually. This one came up the other day, and I do wonder about these sort of things. But 2 Brits were arrested in Albania by the police, accusing them of spying, and they had their radio gear taken off them. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, I've heard more about this story. It's been going around various news feeds, and this was 2 British gentlemen who were both, or are both, licensed amateurs. One of them, however, is an IT engineer that works in the edge of cyber warfare, let's say. So, when you go into a small country like Albania and you're carrying electronic equipment that perhaps the people at the border don't recognize, and that's computing and radio equipment, you can get some misunderstandings. And in this particular case, I suspect if they found some reference to to one of the gentleman's day jobs, that's why they got, first of all, refused entry and held for a while and interviewed and then sent back from whence they came. And you can understand that happening. You have to be very careful when you go across borders. In some jobs, you're going into certain areas in foreign countries that are not necessarily of the same political beliefs or technical levels to where you come from. All of that can cause confusion. You don't speak the language. So, in some ways, I think these 2 gentlemen were risking it a little bit, and it backfired on them, quite honestly. They're home now anyway, that's the main thing. And, maybe next time they'll go with more documentation and clearer information before they try to go back to Albania again or any other similar small country in the east. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I would have thought, though, Ed, in the nicest possible. I've travelled with radio stuff and I've had good and bad experiences. And I had absolutely hell coming out of Ireland one day, but with my gear, which was another long story. But I would have thought if you're going somewhere that's a little bit out of the ordinary, and with what else is going on in Europe, surely one of the things I would have wanted to do would be to make contact with somebody at the National Society there and literally have a Albanian chaperone that would say, okay, I can take you through this, we can do this, we can do that. Not just turn up, because we've heard of other people standing at the bottom of military airports with scanners and things like that. I mean, that's just stupid, but these guys weren't stupid, but they probably could have organised it a bit better, in my opinion. if I'm being fair about this. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, following on from that, Martin, when I first heard about this story, the very first image that flashed through my mind was that group of British plane spotters who were arrested in Greece 10, 15 years ago, where plane spotting isn't actually a thing in the way it is in the UK, and they were completely innocent. They were just looking at planes, but the authorities took a rather different view of matters. This is a rather unfortunate sequence of events, and I can kind of see this one from both sides. As far as the two gentlemen go, assuming they are full licence holders in the UK and they are not visiting Albania for more than 3 months at a time, then they are perfectly entitled in purely licensing terms to go out there and operate under the CEPT provisions, TR61-01, I think it is, as Albania, as I understand it, is a signatory to CEPT. On the other hand, whilst Albania doesn't border onto Ukraine, it's considerably nearer to that part of the world than the UK is, and it is also surrounded by countries that made up the former Yugoslavia, so countries such as Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Croatia, and so on. And those countries, to a greater or lesser extent, do have links with President Putin and Russia. Therefore, I think it's not unreasonable for the authorities in Albania to come out with the reaction that they came out with upon seeing this radio equipment. So I don't blame them for what they did either. I've read the press articles. I gather that the British gentlemen weren't actually arrested. I think they were detained and questioned, but after that they were allowed to go, and I'm sure I read in one of the newspaper articles that they left the police on good terms, so they weren't brutalised by the local authorities or anything like that. So the most important thing is they're back home safe and sound. I hope they get their equipment back. The articles mention it was Kenwood radio gear without specifying what kind. In one of the articles, there is a stock photograph of some Kenwood VHF, UHF handhelds, but I gather that is, as I say, a stock photograph rather than the actual radio gear that's been seized for the time being. And I echo what Martin said about making contact with the authorities in any country that you visit that's a bit sort of out of the way, as it were. And if it's at all possible, even if you only learn how to say, I'm a radio amateur, and nothing else in the local language, and at least learn that, because speaking one sentence in a foreign language will automatically always get you on a much better footing than you would be otherwise. And the only final bit of advice that I can give you is my own experience, my one and only experience of taking radio equipment abroad was when I went to Dayton in 2019 with the ICQ podcast. I only took a VHF, UHF handheld, but I took a cheaper one, shall we say, on the grounds that if it got impounded or stolen or damaged or lost, I wouldn't get as upset about it as I would have done if it had been a much more expensive handheld. Printed out multiple copies of my license and the CEPT provisions and wrapped those around the radio with an elastic band. I made sure there were only amateur frequencies stored in the memories, only because if I had other things programmed in there that in the UK I was legally entitled to listen to or maybe even transmit on, if in America those frequencies happen to coincide with something top secret that I definitely ought not to be listening to, then that unhappy coincidence would make me look really, really bad. So I made sure there was nothing but amateur frequencies in there. I set the transceiver to a frequency in the FM broadcast band, I locked it onto that frequency, and I even wrapped a pair of headphones round it, whose socket didn't actually fit into the side of the handheld, just to give the impression that it was a bog standard broadcast radio receiver. So I went to all those precautions, fully expecting trouble or at least questions when flying into or out of the US. And as it happened, none of the authorities batted an eyelid. So in my case, it was overkill. But if you're taking radio equipment abroad, then some of the things I mentioned hopefully will serve you as useful tips to avoid trouble. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, you did a lot of work, Edmund, to make sure you got in and out of the States okay. But I've got to tell you, Caryn and Dan, well, Dan would know, but Caryn probably didn't. You got hard time off of immigration going in and coming out, but we won't spend too long on that one. But yeah, I have taken HF radios abroad with me. I don't anymore. I tend to. I find with a 2 meter 77 handy talkie and a repeater, you can contact other hams, and often if they've got an event on, you can go off and play with their event and take part in that while you're out there. So that's probably a better way of doing it for me. Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think everyone has really said most of what needs to be said. And Edmund, I think everything, I was hanging on every word, because I think precaution is such a critical thing when you are crossing borders. I've not done that with ham radio equipment myself. The most adventurous I've gotten was taking an HT to Dayton like everybody else. I guess maybe they just got sloppy and just did not think this through. It just sounds like they didn't do their homework. And by all means, check the political climate there, connect with folks who are in the country who can provide a guide to operating there and some legitimacy to your presence there. But I think basically what everybody else has said has me nodding my head. So there's really not much more for me to add.
All right. Well, let's say good points you made as well, Caryn. Dan, last words on this one. I mean, they didn't say they had a Morse key, but that could have given it away, couldn't it?
Well, it's too bad they didn't have an actual photo of the radios that were confiscated. I guess they were confiscated. They were sent to the Albanian Criminal Investigation Unit or something like that. It's too bad they didn't have actual pictures of those, because then you could see if they were really ham radio units or not. The stock photo shows a couple of Kenwood units, but they're definitely not amateur radio units. They don't have the number keypad to allow you to input frequencies and all that stuff. There's a keypad, but you can only switch between channels. So yeah, I mean, you really don't know. So I guess that's all. My only comment is that would have been more interesting to see the actual radios they were trying to take into the country.
Yeah, I know what you mean. At one point in time, I did think about. I built a couple of BitX 40s at one point in time. I had a couple of those. I've got an 80 meter SSB transceiver, small one, which I'd be upset if I lost it, but it wouldn't. I wouldn't lose sleep over it. But I also then thought, well, if I take homemade gear into another country, because it's not type approved, people don't. They could argue very heavily of what is it, is it something that you shouldn't have? I have operated personally in Ireland, most parts of the UK, the Channel Islands, France, Germany, and the States. And Cyprus, and I've not really had a lot of problems. The only major problem I had was coming out of Ireland in the middle of a big security scare, and the security guards hadn't got a clue what the stuff was, what amateur radio was, or anything. So that's something you've got to worry about potentially. I would suggest, rightly or wrongly, that the States is more aware of amateur radio than most countries.
Yeah, just jumping in on that. When Colin and I left Ireland to go to the US for the Hamvention in 2019, you can actually do the customs clearance for the US in Ireland, and it's US people that do that. And as we went through there, they said, "Oh, you're going to Hamvention, are you?" "Yeah, we had a lot of people going through here, going to that. Enjoyed the ham radio." So, the staff there certainly knew about it. So that was actually a bit of an eye-opener because, as you say, normally you don't get people on the border controls that know what amateur radio is. So you have to explain it.
Yeah. And you have to read that country's license. You may have a SEP agreement that says you can operate there, but you have to obey their own licensing. And I think it's changed now.
Their regulations.
Yeah, I think it's changed now, but certainly up until a couple of years ago, France didn't allow VHF digital modes. That was one you could have got caught out on the motorway. But that's one of those things. That's one of those things.
Can I add one other thing, Martin?
You can add another thing, Edmund?
Apart from confirming what you've just said about digital modes such as D-Star not being allowed in France until relatively recently, the other thing, in my abundance of caution when visiting the US, I have some labels with my name and address in the UK on them. I stuck one of them to the outside of the box containing the radio and another one to the back of the radio itself, for two reasons. Firstly, if the radio had been seized by the authorities and they had then gone on to separate somehow the radio from the paperwork that went with it, to avoid them having this box sitting on their desk thinking, "Oh, we've got this radio here, but we've no idea who it belongs to," putting an address on it would actually avoid that. And secondly, it gave an extra air of legitimacy because, after all, if I was up to no good, then I would hardly be advertising voluntarily my name and home address, would I?
Yeah, that's true, mate. That's true. So there's a lot of things.
But you're expecting those folks to be reasonable.
We are, and most times they are, Dan. Let's be honest about it. Most times they are. But, hey, so I caught an Irish Guardie in the middle of a panic, and that was a nightmare. Right, that concludes our news stories. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to let Caryn go first, because Caryn, we normally ask you what you've been up to in the last few weeks, amateur radio, so you got free opportunity here to tell us what you've been up to.
Thank you. Timing is everything on this, Martin. This question could not be better timed. As Ed knows, I am eagerly awaiting the arrival of a battery. We have supply issues here in the States, as everyone has. This battery is the last piece in the configuration of my outdoor shack. This is the year I finally fulfill my dream to do portable operation. So I've got my FT891, I've got my buddy pole, just waiting on the battery, and then I'm going out to do what needs to be done. And that's what I've been up to, in addition to attempting to break the plateau of 10 words a minute on Morse code. So I've been hammering away at that gently on the key. That's probably why you those Morse code stories were contributed by me, not entirely by accident. I think I right now have a big focus on Morse code. It's on the brain. But I am most excited about doing portable. I've only done portable as part of a team. I've only done it for special events with my club and field day. This is going to be me in the trees. So I'm quite excited.
Well, that's good news. And this is not a sexist statement, Caryn, but make sure you're safe. Because even if you're a single person on your own, male or female, don't go off the grid where it's dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, that did occur to me, especially being female or male, but most especially being female with expensive radio equipment. So that's a very, very good point. Well taken. And I hope that everybody who operates portable either operates visibly or with a buddy. I know on Amateur Radio Newsline, we've had one or two stories, instances where the operators didn't end up being safe. And in all cases, they were male. So no, that's not a sexist statement. It's a very smart statement. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I do worry about people, Caryn, and there's a lot of things going portable. There's a lot of things you have to think about, as well as the radio. Make sure you got the right clothing with you, something to drink. It might be a boiling hot day now, but if you're sitting still and on a day when there's a light breeze about and you're sitting still and the people walking around t-shirts quite okay, you do get cold. So silly little things. But we've covered various bits on this in the past. So and I'm sure Ed probably give you much better advice on this than me. But yeah, good. Enjoy your portable.
Thank you so much. And yes, Ed has been my coach. Ed's been coaching me on this, so I'm in good hands.
That's good news. Right, Ed, what have you been up to since our last chat?
Well, it's that Caryn woman, she's been taking all my time asking all these questions about portable.
And I must say, his
joking.
hourly rate is reasonable. His hourly rate is very reasonable.
Yeah, I got a 20% increase, didn't I, recently? 20% of zero is still zero. Yeah, okay, so I've been doing some portable.
Yeah, you have to realise, Caryn, you're allowed to call him an old goat and he won't get upset.
No, he is a goat. He's definitely a goat.
A mountain goat in the soda world, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Ed, let's let you have a word to say.
Not that I shout that much about that, because there's a lot of other people achieving a lot more in SOTA than purely the 1,000 points there. Anyway, talking of SOTA, I was out yesterday on a summit with another ex-Pat Brit amateur here in southern Germany. So we had a nice day out in the sunshine for once. So often you go out and it's cold and rainy and all the rest of it. And that one was one where, as you point out, Martin, it's important to have something to drink with you, in this case, water, because otherwise you get too hot. So, yep, safety first, always safety first. And what I've always said to anybody who gets involved with portable, or especially with summits on the air, if you get to a point and you think you can't achieve it, stop, turn around and go home. There's always going to be another day. Don't push past your limits, because something will go wrong. Not might go wrong, will go wrong, and you'll regret it. So better to recoup your losses and start again. Related to that, I've completely rebuilt my dipole antenna, linked dipole antenna. I've had for many, many years, and it's been patched together from getting broken so many times that I eventually decided it was time to rebuild it with new wire and set it all up correctly and add the right bands to it, etc., etc. And I got caught out on something here I want to tell the listeners about, in case they hit the same problem. Using an antenna analyzer to see how a particular section of the antenna is resonant gave me a bit of a problem on 15 meters. And the analyzer showed two dips. Well, okay, choose the deeper one and trim the wire to go to that dip. Well, as you get closer to that dip, the SWR was going up, whereas the SWR was going down on the dip further away. So start again and go for the other dip. The same in reverse. Really weird. At the end of the day, what I found was, how long was the coax feed? It was just over 14 meters long. Thin coax with a low velocity factor, was probably electrically very close to 15 meters and causing the rig expert analyzer, which is a good analyzer, to have problems. Very strange problem if people, suddenly can't get a dipole to tune on a particular band and they're getting two dips, change the length of the coax feed and the problem goes away. Apart from that, I've been preparing for what everybody should know is coming up from the 24th of this month. It's Ham Radio in Friedrichshafen. So I'm getting the stuff together. Chris is also going to be there from ICQ Podcast. So any listeners, if you see us in the bright orange polo shirts, come up, say hello, and we'll get a bit of a recording from you. I've been testing out the recording gear because it's now 3 years since I used it last, so I've got to make sure it's all working. And yeah, apart from that, this one. I've been testing some software that I've told the listeners about before. The remote control software from Dan YO3GGX is onto version 4 of his remote control software, and that should see the light of day hopefully not too long from now. It's very impressive, and that's about my lot for the last 4 weeks. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds like you've been very busy, Ed. Sounds like you've been very busy, busier than me. Dan, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
I've had so much fun since we last recorded the ICQ podcast. Of course, Hamvention. That's why I missed the last recording. But Hamvention was so much fun this year. It was the most fun I've ever had at Hamvention. Usually, I go there, I get there on sometimes Thursday, sometimes Friday, and by Saturday afternoon, I'm ready. I'm beat. I'm just ready to go home. But this year, I went on Wednesday so I could be there Thursday to set up the ARDC booth, stayed through Sunday when it closed at like 1 p.m., and honest to God, if it had gone 2 more days, I would have been there. I just had so much fun. It was amazing. So we had all these folks coming up to our booth and thanking us for the grants we gave them. And then in addition to that, I got to meet several guys that I've only worked on the air. And it was just, maybe part of it too was, we hadn't done this for 3 years. And that part of it was fun too. So it was just a blast. I just had an incredibly good time at Hamvention. And then another thing that I did just like a week and a half ago is I participated in the Museum Ships Weekend. And there's a museum ship here, not too close to my house. It's about an hour and a half drive away. And it's the lightship Huron. It's in dry dock at this park in a city called Port Huron, which is just where Lake Huron gets started. The southernmost portion of Lake Huron. And again, I had a blast. I went there on Sunday and operated some phone as well as CW. Made a bunch of contacts, and that was a great time. So that's in addition to all the other stuff I do. But Hamvention was just a great time this year. And, unfortunately, some folks did come down with COVID from some of the events, but I managed to avoid that. I didn't go to any of the indoor events where there were lots of people in enclosed spaces, and I managed to avoid catching it. But it was great. So I guess my message here is, if you're thinking about going to Hamvention next year, any of the listeners, please do, because it was a lot of fun this year, and it's only going to be better next year.
Yeah, well, I missed it, Dan. We sat in the UK and thought, it would be a great time to be out there with you, but unfortunately it didn't happen. On the COVID front, I honestly think, guys, going forward, it's something we're going to have to live with, guys, going forward. I've had the 3 jabs. I've had COVID. I'm booked for another jab fairly soon, as soon as my age group comes up. But you can't put your whole life on hold on the if but I might get COVID, as Dan says. It was good fun, be sensible. It's a bit of a lottery whether you get it or not. As Edmund and my friend Neil will say, they went to a rally with me. I don't think I got it at the rally, but anyway, I caught COVID. They spent hours in a car with me, and neither of them went down with it. So it's a little bit of a lottery.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, isn't it, Edmund?
It's the luck of the draw, yes, it does seem to be.
So what have you been up to?
Well, Dan there has mentioned museum ships. Not ships specifically, but the weekend that this podcast is released and the following weekend are the two international museum weekends. And although the website is based in the UK, and although it is predominantly a UK event, or seems to be, it is international. So if anybody's interested in that, if you go to your favourite search engine and type in Radio Amateur Events, you should find the website with a link to the International Museums Weekend. And Amberley Museum, Golf Bravo 2, Charlie Papa Mike should be on the air for all 4 days. In terms of things that have happened, I've been using the Quebec prefix since the 1st of June to celebrate the 70th Jubilee, the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth, and that runs through until the 30th of June. During the first week, I was on HF quite a lot, and I spent more time on 40 metres than I meant to. That's kind of my spiritual home on HF. And I'm pleased to report that pretty much every day there has been very short skip propagation into the UK, which is nice to hear. Quite deep and rapid QSB on some days, but not on all days. And in fact, I would say the days where signals have been very strong consistently have outnumbered the days where the band has been ravaged by SPI. And on some occasions it stayed open till very late at night, which in fact last weekend allowed me to work Golf Quebec 6 Alpha. Is that the right call sign? This is terrible if I've got it wrong. But that's Linda in Bolton, and she very kindly worked me using CW at a not very high speed. 1 or 2 mistakes and repetitions, but let me just check that. Golf Quebec 6, Quebec Alpha, Linda in Bolton, very patiently and kindly worked me deep into the evening after, I think it was about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, on 40 metres CW. So thank you, Linda, for your patience and your forbearance. Elsewhere, the upper HF bands and lower VHF bands have been really open on occasions. There was a station in Croatia, 9 Alpha something, who was calling CQ and working a lot of people on the 4 metre FM calling frequency, 70.450. So that was nice to hear. On 10 metres, I managed to work a station in Germany using C4FM simplex. So if you have Yaesu FT991 or 991A, if you go to 29.250, that is the worldwide C4FM simplex calling / working frequency. So set your rig to C4FM and you might hear something. And if you're really lucky, you might be able to get a signal through to them as well, using not very much power. 10 metres down the other end of the band has been open to Brazil and the Caribbean. Didn't work them, but I did hear a few Papa Yankee stations a few nights ago. But what has been very noticeable with 10 metres, and I'm not overly familiar with this band, so I don't know if this happens regularly or not, but what was very noticeable was the band was full of signals, and then it was almost as if somebody flicked a switch. It was that quick, and the band collapsed, and it went from full of strong signals to absolutely nothing in the blink of an eye. So I guess the moral of that one is, if you come home from work and 10 metres is wide open, get straight on the radio. Don't think, oh, well, I'll put my feet up first and have a coffee and watch the latest instalment of Coronation Street and do 2 or 3 other things first, then I'll switch the radio on. Because if you do that, you could find that it's too late. So, yeah, lots of radio activity going on. And Gateways on the Air is happening this week. The day of release of the ICQ podcast is the final day. But I've spoken with Oscar several times. We interviewed him on the previous ICQ podcast. And there has been a fair bit of portable activity, which has been nice to hear. And a couple of special event stations as well, including one on Tuesday evening just gone, where there was a special event station at a scout camp or group, and there were lots of greetings messages being passed by the young scouts. It was very reminiscent of Jota, Jamboree on the Air, so that was nice to hear as well, and further reinforces, if it needed reinforcing, the impression that there are youngsters out there, contrary to popular belief, who are very interested in amateur radio. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've been very busy. And now comes my tale of woe, because I ain't done half as much as you guys. Been doing a lot of computer type work at the moment. Have had a test version of the talk group running in my house. It's not going out to the internet, but it's running around the house quite nicely. 5 modes in operation, so that when the new version of the ICQ digital group goes live, we will have D-Star, we will have Fusion, we'll have DMR, we'll have NXDN, and we'll have P25. They're all working perfectly well around the house at the moment, so I'm quite pleased with that. And my transcoder machine's working quite nicely. I was doing some work yesterday, Tuesday the 14th. D-Star was offline for a while. I apologise for anybody who was trying to do anything on D-Star, but I've been working on that. But I have spoke to a lot of people on the talk group, and it's been great fun talking to them as always. So, yeah, all I'll say is, guys, I know a number of people still blip it, but if you blip it really quick, then potentially other modes compared with the one you're on might not actually see you, because it takes a little while for it to work its way through all the transcoding. But if you want to contact, just put a call out. And because it's international, it's on all the time, and I see all sorts of people on at various times during the day and night. Done more VHF and UHF, been playing with handy talkies a lot, so that's pretty much what I've been up to. The other one is at the club. One of the guys went out, I was talking about DMR and one thing and another, and he went out and bought a TYT 380 UV, or a similar. It's that model, but the letters might not be in the right order. And, his dad took it back to the dealership and said it didn't work. And they went, yeah, it works, go away. The problem is I tried setting it up, and you put a frequency in it, a simplex analog frequency. It's simple, 145.475. Yeah, just below the calling frequency. And then I set my radio to 145.475 and transmit, and I don't hear anything. So I think I'm too close. So I go across the other side of the room, so I'm not desensing myself. Still nothing. Then we have a rummage round and we look, and it's not actually transmitting on 145.475, although it says on the display it's transmitting on 1450, 150 megs, which is outside the amateur bands. Well, that was a bit worrying, and we apologise if we got anybody thing. But this thing, no matter what you programmed it to do, it would pick random frequencies. And sometimes it would pick the frequency, it would understand the frequency you programmed into the radio, and other times it would ignore it and pick a frequency anywhere it felt like. So hopefully he'll take that back to the dealer, and I might have to go with him or discuss it over the phone, but even starting off with a brand new code plug, wiping the radio totally and starting off with a brand new code plug with one frequency, one talk group, and an analog frequency at that, it transmits wherever it feels like and it receives wherever it feels like. Most frustrating, this TYT radio. So hopefully we'll get it fixed fairly soon. I still think it's a duff radio. So anyway, not a lot from me, but as I say, sounds like everybody's been busy. All that's left for me to do now is to thank everybody for joining me tonight, because I've enjoyed it. I'd like to thank Caryn for joining me tonight as our guest presenter. Thanks for joining us, Caryn.
I always enjoy being here, being with you guys, and on this side of the pond, we need good representation. So you've got Dan, you've got me, and I believe you have Ruth, who occasionally will appear. So thanks for the invite. I'm here if you ever need me back again.
No problems at all. It's a pleasure as always, Caryn. Okay, we also have Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Thanks, Dan, for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Always a blast.
Yeah, great to have you on, Dan. Enjoyed it immensely, and even more so because you weren't here last time, so it's great to catch up with you again. And great, mate. We also have Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG. Thanks, Edmund.
Thanks for having me on, Martin, and it's always nice to hear a new or different voice on the podcast, so lovely to hear Caryn this time.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it? And last but not least, Mr. Ed Durrant over there in Germany, DD5LP.
As always, very welcome, Martin. Looking forward to the next one, and I'll be telling you what happened at Friedrichshafen in the next one, hopefully.
That'll be good news, mate. That'll be good news. Okay, well, I'd like to say 73s to you all, and we'll continue with the rest of the podcast. 73s, guys.
7-3.
7-3.
73.
7-3.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Let's have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. And we start off with thanks here to Rick, Kilo Bravo 7, Sierra Quebec Foxtrot, for forwarding us this information in relation to the Alamogordo Amateur Radio Club. I hope I pronounced that correctly for you there, Rick. They're holding their 36th annual Hamfest on the 3rd of September, and this is obviously after missing a couple of events due to the lockdown. Great news that there's free admission. There's a door prize, drawings going on throughout the day, food wagons for morning brews, eats and lunches, and say loads of parking at the Ottawa County grounds. So say lots of opportunity here. So say great to get into the local area in Texas to get there. Main prizes and draws are purchased by the club and must be present for everything except the actual first prize itself. So make a day of it. Tip up and give the guys that your supporters, say, as it looks like all of our Hamfests are coming back on stream as in-person events, and it'd be great to support the guys there. So we're going to put a link to the group's website, etc., on icqpodcast.com. But certainly, guys, get your diaries out and mark the 3rd of September for that Hamfest there in the state of Texas. Now in the UK, the very popular group, the Bath-based distant learning team, who have so far helped 900 students obtain their full amateur radio exam in the UK, are about to start their next course. Now they usually get a pass rate of around about 80% compared to the average of 66%, so they're certainly onto something here. So they're going to be running their next course from the end of August to December, and they're looking, for people to take part. Now, it's not as simple as just signing up. You will need to complete a little pre-examination test to make sure obviously you're suitable for that type of learning. But once involved, there's a very high chance that you're going to achieve the goal that you're looking for. So as always, we'll put all the details on icqpodcast.com for you. But most important thing is you have to get signed up for this by the end of July, the 26th of July, to take part of that. And Steve, Golf Zero Foxtrot Uniform Whiskey and his team, as I say, will help you through that process of getting you through your next part of your licensing standards. Now, in Sweden, ham operator Martin Modus, Sierra Mike 4 Hotel Charlie Foxtrot, is about to be ordained as a new Archbishop. He's going to be taking on the Diocese of Linköping, I think it's pronounced, and will be the 73rd Archbishop of the Church of Sweden. But obviously for us, it's very interesting that the Archbishop is also a radio ham. It appears he's been a member of his national organisation since the 1980s and has been active for that period of time there. So congratulations to Father Martin for his ordainship as an Archbishop. And fantastic the fact that you can work an Archbishop. If you connect to Sierra Mike 5 Lima Victor Quebec there in Sweden. Right, well, now we're going to head off to our feature this episode. And our feature is by Ed Durrant, DD5 Lima Papa, as he previews the Ham Radio Friedrichshafen show taking place in next week in Germany. So I hope you enjoy his preview, and very jealous if you're attending the show. We'd love to hear your feedback of how you found the show. So I hope you enjoy Ed's feature.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
For those who don't yet know, where have you been hiding? Next weekend, from the 24th to the 26th of June 2022, is the 45th running of the Ham Radio in Friedrichshafen on Lake Constance in the south of Germany. This is my preview, and hopefully Chris and I will report back after the event for ICQ Podcast. Depending upon whose numbers you use, this is the third or fourth largest physical meeting of ham radio operators in the world. It is the number one event in Europe. Of the large Hamfests, it is undoubtedly the one with the best facilities, being located in the Messe in Friedrichshafen, which itself is the best expo centre in Europe and hosts multi-million-dollar events every month of the year. Everything is there that a Hamfest could wish for. Indoor space is vast for exhibitors, for the flea market, and for the technical presentations and stage events. Free Wi-Fi throughout the campus and food for all tastes. Not just beer gardens, but also sit-down and cafeteria-style restaurants. Support for publicity of the event, whether in print, on TV or new media online, is first class, and a full recording studio is available within the press centre for live or recorded internet or radio shows. All of this is supported through some of the friendliest and most helpful people you could ever wish to meet. Ham Radio, with under 20,000 visitors the last time it ran in 2019, is one of, if not the smallest event hosted at the Messe. I hear, though, time and again, how much the Messe staff love having the ham radio enthusiasts there and really want each year to be a bigger success than the previous one. As well as a Hamfest, Ham Radio Friedrichshafen serves as the annual location for the DARC's Lake Constance meeting, and this year it's also hosting some important meetings for the IARU. National societies from all over the world, not only from Europe, attend with information stalls. At the last Ham Radio, visitors came from over 52 different countries. This year's motto is A Reunion of Friends, and after having to cancel the 2 previous years because of COVID, this does indeed feel like it will be a reunion, a chance to meet others not seen for some time. Although the youth camp has had to be cancelled, youth will be well represented through the IARU Region 1 youth team. As with previous years, the DARC will have a kit building event for those youngsters who are new to the hobby. Whether you're into SOTA, Parks, CW, homebrew, contests, microprocessors or microcontrollers, space weather, satellites, or many of the other facets of this great hobby, lectures will take place in multiple professional conference rooms in parallel across the 3 days of the event. As usual, those looking to test for either the German or the US licence will have the opportunity to do so, and there are AATIS Teach the Teachers sessions also arranged at Ham Radio. Individual groups are again organising their own meetups, whether at the Messe or in the evening in the form of meals together in the many restaurants in and around Friedrichshafen. So, what do we know specifically about this year's event? All legal COVID restrictions have been removed. However, the organisers ask you to still wear masks and keep your distance voluntarily, especially when inside. The DARC are officially announcing a network of regional emergency communication centres, starting with a pilot in Markdorf, a town about 40 minutes drive away from Friedrichshafen. They should also have the first of their purpose-built emergency communication trucks on show. The IARU Region 1 meetings that were originally planned for April in Vienna have moved to Ham Radio Friedrichshafen for this year. Perhaps these important meetings will stay in Friedrichshafen in future years. Watch this space. The SDR Academy is taking place at Friedrichshafen, starting at 10 a.m. and running to 6 p.m. on Saturday. Sunday morning sees an ARDF fox oaring contest from 10 a.m. to noon. What about the dealers? Well, it's no surprise after not being at Hamvention that unfortunately Kenwood will not have a stand this year. What is a surprise is that there is no Yesu stand shown on the hall plan. Yesu will undoubtedly be supported through their dealers, of which many are attending, but it looks like we will not see a corporate Yesu stand this year. COVID is still affecting the ham radio industry, and the current raging price inflation across Europe may also have been a factor in some companies' decisions whether to attend. Flex is missing off the plan, but Ellicraft is coming. ICOM have their usual large stand and are expected to display their new SHF P1 2.4 and 5.6 GHz transceiver prototype, along with the new IC PW2 SO2R compatible linear amplifier. This does not mean the halls will be less full, however, with lots of smaller manufacturers and retailers attending to fill Hall 1. The fully air-conditioned halls are large enough to house a fully inflated Zeppelin airship, which were built in Friedrichshafen in the 1930s. Even current airliners can be brought into the halls from the adjacent airport via the rear doors of the halls. 2 of these enormous halls house the flea market of over 300 sellers from 16 countries, so weather is never a worry. However, mid-20s centigrade and sunshine are expected for this weekend, so it's out and into one of the beer gardens to get lunch and a nice cool drink to soothe the throat from all that talking to old friends. As you can hear, I am excited to head down to Friedrichshafen for 3 days of education, fun, friends, and perhaps a little retail therapy after such a long break. If you are coming to Friedrichshafen, be sure to look out for Chris and I in our bright orange ICQ podcast polo shirts. Then come up and say hello, and let us record something from you to go into the ICQ podcast Ham Radio review. For full details of Ham Radio Friedrichshafen, go to their website at hamradio-friedrichshafen.com. Hoping to see you there, this was Ed, DD5LP.
The ICQ podcast, advert free since 2008.
Well, many thanks there to our friend and colleague Ed Durrant, DD5 Lima Papa, for his preview of the Ham Radio Friedrichshafen show, which I'm sure he and those of you who are attending will enjoy immensely. I must admit I am very jealous not to be able to make it this year. Unfortunately, a combination of a reduction in flights from Ireland and work commitments means that I'm unable to attend this year. But I certainly do hope to get back to Germany very, very soon for that wonderful event. So everybody enjoy the show, and we'd love to hear, any feedback that you have, anything you found. Please feel free to drop us a line by visiting the ICQ podcast page and click on the contact us button and let us know how you found Ham Radio Friedrichshafen this year. Well, then I know you continue to work on the improvements we're trying to bring to the digital talk group at the moment. I know you spend a lot of time out there, and you were telling me you're seeing a large number of people being connected to the group. But as I say, you think there might be some user tips we can give people in terms of just not blipping or how to test that they're connected, etc., to get the most out of it. Because we're seeing more and more people connect, more people sort of be there. But as I say, there's a way of people getting more enjoyment from what we're working on here with the digital group.
We certainly are, Colin, and I did say, don't just blip it, put a call through, and I still stand by that. But some of you are quite happy to blip the talk group just to prove that your hotspot is connected to the talk group. Looking at the log overnight and who's gone on where, there are people on pretty much all times of the day and night for me in the UK. Which means we're not hundreds of people. It's not that you'll always put a call out and always get somebody. But in fairness, there are people on at all different times. If you're looking for a call and you just blip it, your hotspot might go, okay, yeah, I'm connected. But it takes about a second, and I would give it 2 to be on the safe side, but it takes a good second of transmission for all of the modes to recognise and sync up. And there is a delay between different modes, and I can certainly see that on the testing I've been doing. You go in on DMR, and D-Star is 1 or 2 seconds behind sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it works. But all I was going to say is there are people tending to connect at all hours of the day and night. So if you are on, put a call through. You might then you have more chance of getting a contact if you put a call through than just blipping it. But it's still looking good, Colin, in my opinion. And hopefully, I'm still working on the version 2. We're going to make sure it's smack on the money, working no problems at all when we put version 2 into operation. But that's quite exciting when that one goes live in my book. So back to you, Colin.
Yeah, as you say, there's a lot of improvements going on in version 2 of the group. So, and again, guys, we're doing that work and spending that time, etc. And as I say, some of our precious funds in that work for Q2 because of we're seeing the number of people logging on and using it, and we know more and more you can continue to enjoy the D-Star group. So please feel free to use this wonderful service we've set up. That is obviously very unique to what we're doing for the podcaster community. So yes, I certainly do feel free to work away from there. Well, so I'd like to wrap up now by thanking our monthly lens subscription donors, as always, for helping us pay our way on this episode. If you find value for the services we do here at the ICQ podcast, we'd ask you to consider making a donation to us by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. When I say think of a value that it means to you, turn that into a monetary figure, select one of the options, and pop it our way. And it's always greatly appreciated. Your support for the ICQ podcast. So we thank everyone again for your continued support. We'd like to thank Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Caryn Eve, Kilo Delta 2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa for taking part in the news roundtable. And again, many thanks to Ed for providing his preview of Ham Radio Friedrichshafen for 2022 as well. Really do appreciate doing that for us, Ed. Right, well, I think the last thing to do, as I say, and I know this is an event that's happening all around the world this weekend, is to wish yourself and our fellow, I say, male hams who are fathers a happy Father's Day. And I say, not only do I wish you make mum a cup of tea and find a chocolate biscuit, but you know what? Make yourself a fine cup of coffee and find yourself a treat too for Father's Day. And as I say, enjoy that treat, won't you, Dad? And as I say, have a wonderful weekend and play radio, and a happy Father's Day to you and to all our fellow colleagues and hams out there who are fathers too. So, and obviously for the team who are fathers. So, yeah, happy Father's Day to all.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. And not wishing to pour water on your bonfire, but Phil tells me it's Father's Day in September in Australia. But that's another, I think, different parts of the world. But certainly UK, Ireland, and Europe probably this weekend. But more importantly than Father's Day, Colin, it's your mum's birthday on Saturday. So we can also find your mum something nice on Saturday as well. So I'm going to have to make that cup of tea, and we'll go from there, Colin.
Oh, exactly. So maybe it's a slab of birthday cake then with that cup of tea then today. Let's see what you can find. Well, I bid you 73s, everyone else 73s as well. And as always, guys, we look forward to catching up again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
Yeah, 73.